future is an intangible thing. The thing about it is that it never arrives. We have visions of the future and what it will look like, but it never quite goes exactly as we expect. And then once we're there, we're still thinking about the future. Progress is central to human existence, but on the corporate level, this becomes growth. A company like Tesla has to keep growing, or it is seen as failing. Tesla has gone through a lot over the years and has been one of the most popular companies and stocks due to their growth story, but now Tesla is, quote, in between growth waves. They have communicated this themselves because they have the very popular Model Y and 3, but to truly expand from there, they need to make an affordable EV. Recently, it has become clear that Elon Musk, CEO at Tesla, has a vision of Tesla's future that most people don't quite understand or agree with because it seems pretty far-fetched by today's standards. Today we're going to break down Tesla's Robotaxi program, what it would mean for Tesla if Elon is right about this, and what it would mean if he's wrong. So let's get into it, and a special thanks to Drift for sponsoring a portion of this video. Public transportation is an interesting endeavor. When you look at it with a very broad lens and think about designing an ideal society, great, fast, affordable public transportation would likely be central to it. However, human progress is never predictable, as we talked about earlier, so cars have become extremely popular as a mode of transportation. That's why companies like Tesla have come around to take the gasoline car and make it something that is more efficient, cheaper to operate long-term, and has zero emissions. Ultimately, Tesla's goal is to accelerate the world's transition to sustainable energy, and they have done this in many ways, but at the same time, they're a publicly traded company. At the end of the day, they have investors to keep happy, so they need to also be balancing what aligns with their mission and what aligns with growth. In comes full self-driving and the idea of the Tesla Robotaxi. At the surface, this goal seems pointless to many. I'll just drive myself. I would never trust a robot. Just another toy for the rich. Or maybe Elon has just read too much sci-fi. The funny thing is, the latter is actually fairly true. Elon Musk is fairly influenced by the writings of people like Isaac Asimov, who wrote the Foundation series, the robot novels, and more. He has even cited this as inspiration for him to start SpaceX. Oftentimes in sci-fi art, we get a vision of a future where humanoid robots live among us, cars all drive themselves, and much more. But a common theme that happens throughout history is the cycle of art-inspiring technology and technology-inspiring art. We see this in many cool ways and many scary ways, like when OpenAI recently almost positively tried to copy the voice of the AI voice assistant from the movie Her. They did this while making their own somewhat flirty voice assistant. In any case, the idea of self-driving cars has been on people's minds for decades, but as something that might happen in a very long future, probably once I'm no longer here. Elon Musk, on the other hand, laid out this goal back in 2016 for Tesla. In his master plan, part 2, there's an entire section about autonomy. Quote, as the technology matures, all Tesla vehicles will have the hardware necessary to be fully self-driving with fail operation capability, meaning that any given system in the car could break and your car will still drive itself safely. It is important to emphasize that refinement and validation of the software will take much longer than putting in place the cameras, radar, sonar, and computing hardware. Here he details the software getting refined, it getting better than a human, but it taking time for different jurisdictions to approve it. Quote, we expect that worldwide regulatory approval will require something on the order of 6 billion miles. He details the safety of such systems and how, back in 2016, this was a reason for deploying partial autonomy, and then goes into sharing. Quote, when true self-driving is approved by regulators, it will mean that you will be able to summon your Tesla from pretty much anywhere. Once it picks you up, you will be able to sleep, read, or do anything else en route to your destination. Your car could generate income for you. It is utilized during all the times you aren't using it, and Tesla will operate their own fleet where customer-owned car supply isn't enough. In summary, at the end of this plan, he said, develop a self-driving capability that is 10 times safer than manual via massive fleet learning. Enable your car to make money for you when you aren't using it. These are fascinating goals and ideas, but of course they have become quite tainted by his own communication in this regard over the years. At Tesla's Autonomy Day, Elon detailed Enable Robotaxi pending regulatory approval as a 2020 plan. In fact, this was a quote from that event.
I feel very confident predicting autonomous robotaxis for Tesla next year. Not in all jurisdictions, because we won't have regulatory approval everywhere, but I'm confident we will have at least regulatory approval somewhere literally next year.
This became sort of a trend for Tesla and Elon in particular. He has rightfully been criticized a lot for it, especially since the FSD system is something they sell under the name full self-driving, even though it still very much hasn't been perfect and requires interventions and attention from a human if anything goes wrong. It has created a boy who cried wolf scenario, and it seems to have exacerbated people's pre-existing doubts about self-driving cars. The thing about Tesla selling FSD this whole time is that they have been selling cars with the FSD hardware for years. Every single Model 3 and Y, in addition to their other cars past a certain date, includes their FSD hardware and camera setup. As such, they collect data when their normal Autopilot system is used, as well as FSD. FSD is the system that actually handles situations like red lights, turns, forks, and tries to figure it all out. In theory, it can drive anywhere. In the last couple of years, this changed in a major way for Tesla because they went all in on cameras being trained by AI. They're not using any radar or ultrasonic sensors or anything else to enable self-driving, which is the polar opposite of what we see from companies like Waymo. The advantage here, if achieved, is that cameras are far cheaper to put in cars than these complex LiDAR sensors, and people like Lex Friedman have been clear that this likely is the right path, long term. It just requires tons of training, and how long that will take is unclear. With Tesla's recent version 12 FSD release, we've seen them go complete end-to-end neural network. And NVIDIA's CEO explained the effect of this. Quote, "It's an end-to-end generative model, and it learns from watching video, and it learns about how to drive, and using generative AI, predict the path and how to understand and how to steer the car. And so the technology is really revolutionary." At this point, Tesla has now collected about 1.3 billion miles on FSD and counting, and the growth is exponential now. Remember, Elon said they expect to need about 6 billion miles, and this is why we're seeing everything at Tesla shift to the idea of a robotaxi. It's clear that Tesla was planning on making a dedicated, affordable, drivable car, but that has been put on the back burner in favor of their dedicated robotaxi, which they will unveil on August 8th. We've recently seen a number of leaks and teasers of what this car will look like. It's expected to be a very simple, small two-seater, likely inspired by the Cybertruck. In fact, Elon has recently called it the Cybercab. This is a huge move to put all of their resources into and announce a dedicated robotaxi entirely reliant on a heavily delayed piece of software. So this could go one of two ways, if Elon is right and if Elon is wrong. Next up today, that new car smell is one of the best parts of getting a new vehicle for many, but in time that smell does eventually go away. There are so many bad air fresheners out there that shopping for a new scent can be daunting. That's where today's sponsor, Drift, comes in. Drift makes a line of great smelling air care products for both your car and home. Their air fresheners are made using sustainably sourced wood and scented using all natural oils that are guaranteed to leave your car smelling fresh. Their car products cost between $9 and $15 too, so they're super affordable. Drift also offers a great subscription package designed to keep your car smelling fresh all year. To start, you get your first scent delivered to you alongside a mounting clip for inside your car. From there, Drift will send you their special Scent of the Month, which includes seasonally inspired limited edition scents meant to keep your car smelling unique all year round. Your subscription to Drift is also really flexible. You can change your scent choices and delivery frequency or cancel anytime without hassle. To get started with your Drift subscription, scan the QR code on screen or visit drift.co and use the code SHAWTECH to get 55% off your first month. That makes it a little over $4. If Elon Musk is right, then Tesla's latest versions of FSD are truly seeing exponential improvement. This exponential improvement will, in some sort of near future here, cross over from being an impressive student driver to being a fully capable, completely aware driver that is safer than a human being. This would first enable current Tesla owners to have their cars drive for them without supervision, but should also allow them to put their cars on Tesla's rideshare network. You use your car as you need it personally, then when you get home and your car would normally sit idle for 8 to 12 hours or so, you allow it to go out and work for you. It makes money for you, essentially paying for itself, but when you do use it, it's also safer than if you were to be driving. More on that in a minute. For Tesla's dedicated robotaxi, combined with current cars, these would significantly drive down the cost of rideshare or transportation in general. The way Tesla often thinks of this is in cost per mile, but even without a number prediction, it's pretty clear. This car can operate all the time. It can charge instead of fill up with gas, and it doesn't require a driver. As a customer who doesn't own a car, all of those things make ride-hailing that much more affordable. For many customers, it would mean they no longer actually need to own a vehicle. Another piece that drives down cost is Tesla's camera-based approach. This will ensure that the robotaxi from Tesla is far less expensive up front, and even in maintenance than something like a Waymo. These robotaxis won't be full of expensive sensors, they'll have simple ones that are utilized in effective ways. Cameras all around the car to see everything all the time, the AI that has been trained on that, and the FSD computer in the car processing it as it drives. Cost can also be driven down by less impressive specs. Nobody needs a record-breaking 0 to 60 or incredible handling on a robotaxi that you simply want to be a smooth ride from point A to point B while you pay attention to something else. As for time, these can operate almost 24/7, excluding charge time, of course. That's still something Tesla needs to show us how they will solve, since these robotaxis can't plug themselves in at a supercharger, but that may involve inductive charging, which is something we know that they are actively working on. In fact, the Cybertruck has the initial pieces of this for a future retrofit. But with that solved, these would autonomously plan routes to charge, and a charge wait time is no problem for the cost of a ride since it's not taking time out of a human's shift. One more cost savings is the battery. For many robotaxis, range will not need to be very high. For doing simple rides around town, a much smaller battery than we're used to can be used. And since this vehicle will be small as well, it will be extremely efficient. That means it could have a 150-mile range and it wouldn't matter since you aren't the one actually experiencing charge times. Then there can be dedicated long-range robotaxis for longer journeys with less charge time. It's a far better use of battery resources than everyone buying a 300-mile range car that sits around unutilized most of the time. One of those battery packs could perhaps be enough for 2 or 3 robotaxis. So all of this brings up the question, how does this align with Tesla's mission to accelerate the world's transition to sustainable energy? In fact, if this is achieved, it would actually be accelerating sustainable energy in a far more efficient manner than if they kept selling normal EVs. The battery is smaller, the car is more efficient, the car can operate at all times, and you need less of them on the road. Then comes safety. This is an aspect that many people don't want to concede, because as it stands right now, self-driving requires a human to take over. So inherently it's not safer, right? Humans have intuition and reaction time, but ultimately humans do get distracted. On average in the United States, there are 6 million passenger car accidents each year, with over 38,000 people losing their lives each year. They are a leading cause of death in the US, so if this could be improved upon, wouldn't we want that? Tesla publishes Autopilot safety data and actually recently detailed that for Q1 of 2024, quote, we recorded 1 crash for every 7.63 million miles driven in which drivers were using Autopilot technology. For drivers who were not using Autopilot technology, we recorded 1 crash for every 955,000 miles driven. By comparison, the most recent data available from NHTSA and FHWA from 2022 shows that in the United States there was an automobile crash approximately every 670,000 miles. By this data, that would show that using Tesla self-driving is already 11 times safer than a human driver, but it is important to take this data with a grain of salt. This includes all Autopilot data, and while they, quote, count any crash in which Autopilot was deactivated within 5 seconds before impact, we don't fully know what situations they are comparing. Autopilot itself is primarily designed for freeway use only, and this is where customers use it, so we are likely comparing data predominantly collected on freeways to data collected anywhere by NHTSA. FSD ultimately will work anywhere, so I personally want to see a direct FSD version 12 being used everywhere comparison. Still, this points to the idea of self-driving cars being much safer than human beings, especially long-term. We only have 2 eyes, but a self-driving Tesla has 8 cameras, a computer, and more, operating without distraction ever. So again, if Elon is right and FSD continues improving, this technology could get to the point where it's a no-brainer. It would be the safest option on the road and actually start dropping the number of accidents per year in the US. That's something that is pretty hard to argue against if it arrives. Right now, a lot of FSD objection comes from those using it and finding it too cautious or slow. It doesn't drive the way you want it to drive, and so people disengage and drive themselves. Maybe it also did something very dumb, but as with all AI training, it gets better and better with time. The other thing to remember is that you won't care how this thing drives long term. You'll actually want a cautious self-driving car taking things slowly and making for a smooth ride while you're doing work on your laptop or something. On top of that, again, thinking long term, it won't matter to other drivers out there since so many cars will be robotaxis. August 8th is a very bold timeline to announce this car. I don't think anyone is expecting them to be fully feature complete by then, but the thing many aren't considering is the fact that a staggered, controlled launch of this vehicle is entirely possible. Waymo vehicles exist in various markets and are being used entirely without drivers, but the big caveat is they are geofenced. They can only drive in certain predetermined, incredibly mapped areas. Tesla's approach has been very different, making an AI that can drive anywhere, even places no other Tesla has ever been. But at launch, they could easily start in small geofenced markets, prove out their robotaxis on a very small scale, while Tesla customers continue collecting data for FSD everywhere else. They can even incentivize Tesla owners to go use FSD in certain areas with their own cars in order to prepare that area for a true robotaxi launch. Many see self-driving as something that is decades away, and that's why an August 8th Robotaxi announcement seems crazy. It could be decades away on the scale Tesla has talked about, but it could also arrive much earlier than expected with a staggered, controlled rollout. So with all of that said, if all of this is achieved, where does that lead Tesla? Well, it makes Tesla one of, if not the most valuable companies ever. Solving autonomy completely changes the face of human transportation. Their lead here would remain and only be improving, so they would license that tech to other companies, ride-hail fleets, and automakers. They have already talked about doing this, and it really shows why people argue that Tesla is actually an AI company. No automaker, even if they make great, affordable, compelling EVs, could ever come close to the growth a company would see from being the ones that solve autonomy. The impact is something that most truly can't even imagine. But of course, that's all assuming that Elon is right here. So what happens if Elon is wrong? There are multiple ways this could play out, but the main thing would be that Tesla's latest shift to put all resources into FSD just leads to further development of the technology. The empty FSD promises continue coming, and as a result, the Robotaxi never actually is able to hit the market, or at least not for a very long time. We would be on the cusp of something big for a long time, but if it never crosses over to the point where human intervention is not required at all, then it won't matter for most people. It will be a very impressive technology, and plenty of people will continue using it within their Teslas, but it won't be something that changes the world. In the meantime, if that were to happen, Tesla would have drilled down all of their resources into this project, and likely shifted plans of a future drivable, affordable car to iterations on the Model 3 and Y. They'd continue to have those cars, but would likely fall far behind when it comes to the biggest project in most people's eyes, making and scaling an affordable EV. The Model 3 and Y are great. With tax credits, incentives, and gas savings, it can be a better deal than many realize, but it still isn't able to break into the full market in a way that a car that starts around $25,000 to $30,000 new can. If Tesla waits on that project because a Robotaxi is a far better proposition, but fails on that, then we could see companies like Rivian, GM, Ford, Volvo, Polestar, and more beating them to the punch, figuring out how to bring down cost on a future car and getting it in the hands of many people from multiple factories. What's interesting here is how much of this is ambiguous. The future of FSD, if achieved, is actually somewhat clear, but if FSD isn't achieved, it's tough to predict. That's because Tesla would be able to pivot and shift and revise plans throughout the whole process. Maybe we could even see them building up the infrastructure and assembly lines for a Robotaxi, only to then shift that over to work on a drivable, affordable car that appeals to the masses. Another possibility is that if FSD and AI development don't deliver results, and the stock keeps taking hits as a result, Elon could be out at Tesla. This could signal a major shift for the company, with much more of a focus on simply making great drivable electric cars. For some that would be great, for others that would be a nightmare. Then there's the possibility that Tesla itself splits off. The AI piece continues development under the Tesla name or a different name, then Tesla Motors continues on, or gets bought out by a legacy automaker in order to continue that specific work, without what some would consider, quote, AI distraction. Ultimately, competition in the EV space is great for consumers, and I'm excited to see what the future holds. It's unknown, but a major shift is likely on the horizon, both for the industry and for Tesla. What do you think will happen, though? Will this gamble pay off, or spell trouble for Tesla? Leave a comment below to let me know your thoughts. In the meantime, if you want to see a breakdown of Tesla's main affordable competitor, BYD, you can check out that video linked up here or in the description below. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you on the next one. And another thank you to Drift for sponsoring this video. Get 55% off your first month with code SHAWTech, making it just over $4 to get started.